County, yes. Oh, excellent. Well done.
All right.
All right. And so the Master Gardeners and Slow Food Lake Tahoe and UC Davis Turk, the Tahoe Environmental Research Center, we have been providing these science-based classes on growing at high elevation for the last 8 growing seasons. And so participants receive support on planting and maintaining crops. You'll notice that all of our contact information is readily available. So we're always available to assist. And so any question, no matter what it is, if you want to ask the potato woman, Melissa, about chickens, yeah, feel free. She would love it. And at the same time, what we ask for you is that we send out these surveys at the end of the season in order to try to figure out what growing techniques you used, what varieties grew best for you. And all of that information is being used for future presentations so that essentially we get this really great institutional knowledge of what is growing well in the Tahoe area, greater Tahoe area. So these Zoom classes have been on Wednesdays from 6 to 7:30 p.m. We have started live in-person talks as well, and that's being held at the Slow Food Lake Tahoe demonstration garden in Truckee, and those are on Saturdays at 10 a.m. So this Saturday, Sue will be there doing a live presentation. And you can register for any of these talks at slowfoodlaketahoe.org. Just check out their events page. So as I mentioned, we're at talk number 7, which is tomatoes. And next week, we will be featuring herbs, and that will be presented by Dave and Melissa. So one thing that we do want to emphasize with all of these gardening workshops is that we always have the watershed in mind, that anything that we do within our watershed is going to affect our lake, which we all depend on for not only growing our crops, but to hydrate and to stay healthy. So just always be aware that when you are potentially applying fertilizer or any sort of nutrients from that, you are doing it very conscientiously and thoughtfully. Keep your garden away from steep slopes where runoff cannot be controlled. Avoid excessive watering as it potentially pushes nutrients below the root zone. And so not only are you potentially entering nutrients into our groundwater, but you're also bypassing those nutrients for your plants. And so it's a double whammy, so just be a little more careful when you're watering your plants. And also remember that the fertilizers, that what they're doing to your plants, making them big and beautiful, will do the same thing for those plants in the water, for all that algae and that paraphyton in the lake. They will all thrive as a result of excess fertilizer. So just some food for thought for applying fertilizer or other amendments. You want to water plants before applying your amendments. So that way your plants actually have an opportunity to absorb those nutrients rather than it just running off our somewhat hydrophobic soils. Do frequent applications of low ratio fertilizer. It'll have a better effect on the plants without affecting the watershed as much. And if there is precipitation on the forecast, avoid fertilizing before that happens. Otherwise, you run the risk of the precipitation taking all that fertilizer and running it off the ground into the lake or stream nearby before your plants actually have an opportunity to absorb it. So with that, I want to introduce to you all Sue Tanzi. I have her spotlit, and I'm going to let her share her screen. And while she's sharing her screen, let me tell you a little bit about Sue. So Sue has loved growing plants since a friend first gave her a small succulent back in 2001. And she joined the Master Gardener program in 2020 after receiving some asparagus crowns at the farmer's market. She loves every aspect of gardening and growing food. She is especially knowledgeable about tomatoes, seed saving, and seed starting and germination. So that's Sue in a short little nutshell, basically her love of plants have come from plant sharing. And so her being a presenter for these presentations just goes so hand in hand with that, in the sense that she is sharing her love for tomatoes with all of you and hoping to inspire you all to become more into gardening. So with that, I'm going to let Sue take over the presentation and we'll get started.
All right, I'm having a little technical difficulty. I do love gardening, but I do not like computers. So is this okay for you guys, or it's not? I need to, do you want to share your screen, Allison, and just do the slides for me like we said?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yep.
It worked in practice. I don't know. Okay. Hi, I'm Sue, and I'm going to talk to you tonight about tomatoes. And go ahead and go to the next slide. And Allison's already introduced me. Thank you for the introduction, Allison. Tonight we're going to cover a project overview first, tell you a little bit about what we're doing, then garden practices and phenology, taxonomy and anatomy, planting and care, history and culinary aspects, varieties and added information, and distribution of plant materials. Next. Phenology is the study of periodic events in biological life cycles and how these are influenced by seasonal variations in climate, as well as habitat factors such as elevation. And we do live at a high elevation. And so that affects the way our tomatoes grow, and it's just a fact, and there's ways around it. And I'm going to share some of those ways with you tonight, because I've had plenty of success in Tahoe growing tomatoes. I'm not going to get a 10-pound beefsteak, but it can be done. So examples of phenology are when the leaves and the flowers,
tomato class,
the first flight of the butterflies, the first appearance of all the birds that you see, you know, springtime. And also in the fall, when the leaves change colors and
so I can get
lose their, can you guys hear me okay? I'm getting some feedback from somebody. Okay. The timing of the
you don't have
developmental cycles of
headphones, do you? I
temperate.
can use.
They
Won't fit here.
They won't fit on the phones.
Our area is much different from most, and we need to take extra steps to be successful. Taxonomy is a system of arranging animals and plants into natural related groups based on some common factor, such as the way they're shaped, the structure, or the way their seed turns into a plant, the chemistry of them, the basic taxonomy. Let's see. I'm sure you guys remember this from elementary school, maybe. Kings play cards on green tables or something like that. Anyways, we have their kingdom is plantae, division in botany, it's division, and Magnoliophyta. Their class is Magnoliopsida. Their order is Solanellus. I think I'm saying that. Okay. The genus is Solanum, and the species is Solanum lycopersicum. Next. And the word Solanum that you hear, that's the one you're going to see on the seed pack, is more towards the bottom of all of it. You'll see those words. This basic anatomy of a tomato plant, I thought this was a really nice illustration. Good examples on here. You can see all the parts from the roots all the way to the growing tip. You see the flower and all of its components, and the fruit and all of its components. And hopefully take a good look at this, because the more you know about the parts, the less damage you're going to do to your plant. And the better off you'll be in the long run. So this is a really, really good one for all three parts of a tomato. Next. And in case you didn't know, a tomato is actually a berry, which is weird for some people to hear that. There's other fruits that are also berries that you would never think are berries. And a tomato is a fruit. And here's the name, Solanum lycopersicum, like what you would see on the seed pack, commonly known as the tomato plant. The species originated in Western South America and Central America. The Mexican word tomato gave rise to the Spanish word tomat, in which the English word tomato derived, with no E, by the way, unless it's plural. And I learned that yesterday. And I love tomatoes, and I never thought to even, I thought it was like the word color with the U, but it is not. It's Tomato. Its domestication and use as a cultivated, I can't read that word, may have originated with the indigenous peoples of Mexico. The Aztecs used tomatoes, the Spanish, they all brought the tomatoes to America and in the big Columbian Exchange. And from there, the tomato is introduced to other parts of the European colonized world in the 16th century, long time ago. I wonder what those tomatoes looked like. They probably weren't real pretty. Probably didn't taste that great. Numerous varieties of the tomato plant are widely grown in temperate climates across the country, and greenhouses really help places like Tahoe or any place that's cold to grow tomatoes all year long so that we can enjoy them all year long, even though they do not taste as good. Next. Here we have your two basic, well, there is one that's a semi-determinate, but we'll just stick to these two for now. There you have the determinate, which you can see is like a bush, and it's, you know, robust and full and all of that. And it kind of stays in the shape of a bush. And here we have the indeterminate, which you can see it grows up things. It pretty much does whatever it wants to, and it'll grow every which way, unless you prune it. So these, consider them a vine, and the determinate, consider them more of a bush. Next. And this is a little hint that I like to say, how I taught myself to remember was the determinate tomato is determined to produce its fruit and then die. And the determinate tomato is determined to do its job and then quit. If that helps you guys. I mean, it doesn't really, it's not scientific, but it helped me. Indeterminate, they're not determined when it'll stop flowering or growing. It just wants to keep growing and growing. It'll grow in good climates like Sacramento. It'll grow all year long, and you can have like say a sun gold tomato all year long. But in Tahoe, we'll be happy to get them for 3 months. So, and determinate tomatoes tend to be shorter, and like you saw in the picture, the indeterminates are just, they go wherever they want. Okay, next. All right, pruning. Pruning is really important for your tomato plant because they will grow like crazy once they get established. Just give it a little bit and it'll grow like crazy. And we all know how hard it is to cut off, you know, those first leaves, but it has to be done in order for your tomato plant to, you know, grow properly. And what you want to do is you just, first off, when you're going to plant your plant, you just take off the dead looking stuff and all the suckers, and we will go more into pruning, a lot more into pruning after this. And tomato suckers are the teeny little stalks, you know, between the V, and I have a diagram for you. And this is really important. So remember the suckers, you want to just get rid of them. They grow on both types, the determinate and the indeterminate. But with the determinate, you would only do them basically when you plant them and maybe a little bit after that, but then you basically want to leave the determinate bush alone unless it grows crazy big and there's too many sun leaves and it's just taking up all the good stuff, and you can pluck some of those off and more of the nutrients will go to the fruit. And I know it's hard. I know it's hard because it's a beautiful plant and it's hard, but you will get a better tomato in the long run because it will just suck up all the energy for the rest of the plant. And just like a half dead leaf, I mean, you can cut off half of it. That's better than not cutting it off. But don't leave anything dead on. It's just going to try to, it's and suck it all out. So, and overgrowth can make harvesting really hard, and you won't even see a tomato, and then something else gets it before you do. And you don't want that because you work so hard for these tomatoes, and it's hard enough to keep the critters away, but you're giving them a better chance if you can't see what you're harvesting. So it'll be less rewarding in the long run. You'll get frustrated. So prune your tomatoes. Next. Here's that great picture. Okay, so you can see where it says axle. That's like, I like to call it like the armpit, just because that's how I remember it. See the sucker in the axle? That's the guys you always want to get rid of. Always, especially in the indeterminate, because that will grow a whole new main tip, a whole new main branch. And you basically want to just keep one and let these leaves, the regular leaves just grow, and they go off more to the side. You'll get to know your tomato plant, and you'll be able to tell. You remove leaves in the middle, like I said, for better airflow and more sunlight, and so that you can see what you're doing and how your tomato plant's doing, and you can see those hornworms if you have any. I've only ever had a couple, but I have had them, so they blend in really well. And I have a picture for you in case you've never seen them. When it comes towards the end of the growing season, you can cut the top off, the growing top off after the last bit of fruit, so that it's not trying to grow. It's just going to send all the good stuff to your tomatoes. So you can go ahead and do that if you know the frost is coming, or if you know your plant is just done. So, and don't forget the indeterminates need to be pruned throughout the season. Next. And this is basically what they should look like as you're keeping them pruned. More of a bush, a rounded shape. And as you can see, this one's going straight up and it's going to keep going. So you'll see. I hope that you guys all get to see how these tomatoes grow for you and learn all the parts, because it's very important. Next. All right, so in order to keep your plants healthy, you have to keep them off the ground. And in order to do that, you need to trellis them or stake them or cage them. And all tomato plants are vines that would otherwise sprawl along the ground if gardeners didn't stake them to grow upward. If left to their natural tendencies, tomato vines would become a damp, tangled mess on the soil, where they attract disease and pests. And the indeterminate varieties tend to grow much longer than the determinate varieties. To keep a healthy plant and get good production, you need a little support. There are many ways you can accomplish this. This is an example of trellising. It's anything you want to use for trellising, anything at all that your plants can climb up and support them as they grow upwards. And you can tie off a few spots if you'd like, but with the trellising, it kind of weaves and holds itself. And then here we have staking. And I like this method because you can see your tomatoes. If you keep them pruned, you can see your fruit really well. And it's okay to not have bottom leaves. It's really okay. You don't want any leaves to touch the ground ever, because bugs crawl up it, water gets on it, all of that. And caging is a good old reliable method. Everyone knows a tomato cage, and they work really well. Just be careful when you stick them in, not to stick it directly into your roots of your tomato. Next. And there's a lot of creative and inexpensive ways to trellis. You can use anything, like I said. Some of the stuff I have used T-posts and twine to tie everything up, and that works great because you can do whatever pattern of tying that you like, and as much as you want. And this one is a cattle panel, which every gardener should have at least one cattle panel for their garden. They come in handy for so many things. All kinds of trellises. You can bend them. They're great. So this one here is held up with the T-posts, and that's a very sturdy way. And I like how they put the tomato plants in the middle, tight enough to where they have that support. And this is a kind of a lattice example here. It looks like somebody just got some sticks and kind of tried to make like a pattern, like an obelisk, I think it's called. And you know, you can get creative and do anything you want. I had some really funky looking stuff in my yard last year from making my own stuff like this, but it was fun. And PVC is always a good option. I think it's still pretty cheap, but I don't know. You could probably get some free somewhere, but that's always a good option because then you can put wire, you can put string, you can do whatever you want, and it's pretty sturdy. Next. So you can basically use for staking anything long and skinny that you can stick in the ground. As long as it's not going to rot at the bottom and fall apart, or, you know, not hold your plant up, because that defeats the purpose of even staking it. So you want to use something pretty thick and long, and like it shows here, it looks like a piece of old fabric. That's great because that's not going to damage your tomato plant at all. Like twist ties I'd be a little weary of using because they can cut into the stem and the branches. But if you're careful, it's okay. But like this, it looks good, but you know, just be careful how tight you do it. Just leave it room to grow. Next. And my personal favorite to use has been the stalks from my sunflowers. They are like a tree trunk and they worked really well for me. And I've heard a few other people using them too, and I was just going to throw them out anyway. So, and they didn't rot, nothing. I still have them. So organic and free, you can't beat that, right? Next. Okay, so when you're getting ready to plant your tomatoes, you want to gather all your stuff together. You want to gather all your tools. I like to use this little thing here in the picture. It's called a hori knife. It's like a spade, but it can shred on one side. It has measurements. It's just great. You can do a lot with it. You can plant things with it. You can dig out weeds while you're down there. It's my favorite tool of all tools. And you want to make sure you have your soil prepared, and you want to get in there and fluff it up really good, whether you're using a pot or a raised bed. You want to fluff it up, add your nutrients to it, or use brand new, whatever it is you're going to do. Yeah, so gather all your supplies together and choose out your tomato plant. That's the best part. And here we have a little baby tomato plant, which ours will probably be a little bigger than that, but this is a good example of a tomato seedling and how it needs to be pruned. And see these little babies right here? You want to take those off, and you want to take the next set off and leave that top on there. And that's what you do to the baby ones, because these are going to do nothing for you. So next. So you want to prepare your hole, and you're going to do that. What other method you're going to use? I'm going to go over a couple different methods. You just want to make sure your soil's loose, and if you need to go deeper, it's not going to take you forever. So get it nice and ready. You're going to do either your hole or your trench, and we'll go over that. And if you want to add a little bit of a slow release fertilizer, like a handful of the granules, I do that under every plant, and I really like it. And it's just an all-purpose slow release, so it'll be for all year long. And you will still have to fertilize, but that will give you an even better start. All right, then you want to plant in your plant and backfill it in and tuck it in and water it in. And I wish I could show you that, but we're not doing that demonstration this year, but you can watch anybody do it on YouTube. So, and then after you water it in, you want to install your supports, or you can put your support in first and then water it in. But make sure you water it in well, because that's going to make all the soil touch the roots, and that way you don't get pockets. And I've had it to where there's an air pocket and my plant shrivels because I didn't plant it correctly. So you want to make sure it's nice and snug. Next. Okay, on the left, this is an example of the trench planting, and it's just what it says it is. You dig a trench about a foot long. Well, it depends the size of your plant. As you can see, you want to make the trench big enough to include your entire plant. You're only going to leave that top part out of the soil. You're going to cover and backfill all of this over the top. And this is a deep planting. I hope you can see how deep it is. It's not really that good of an example, but plant them nice and deep because you are going to take off those baby leaves, the first leaves there, and you're going to plant it till about right here, 2 to 3 inches up above the dirt. And move you guys over. And container planting, that is going to be the winner for Tahoe, in my opinion, because there's many advantages. We'll go over those in just a second, and it looks nice, and you have more control over it this way, with the way the weather is and critters and all that stuff. Next. Okay, the benefits for trench planting. Tomato plants creates better, bigger and stronger and more robust plants that produce more fruit. Studies show that trench planting tomatoes creates a larger, more vigorous root base, allowing the plant to absorb more nutrients and water. This allows the plant to grow faster and become more robust. Every single little tiny root that's on this stem, or every part, it's going to grow roots all. That's why you're trench planting it. It's going to grow roots all back and forth, up and down, everywhere. And you gave it a nice hefty area to do so. So that is the benefit of trench planting. You want to dig it about 6 inches wide, 8 inches deep or so, depending on the size of your plant. You lay it down horizontally after you prune it, and then you backfill it with the soil to cover it up to the first set of leaves. And then, you know, water it in, stake it in, do all that good stuff, make sure it's happy. And I had success with trench planting. It worked really well. I was surprised. So, but deep planting may be a better benefit for Tahoe. Let's get to that next. Deep planting tomatoes increases the number of roots, just like trench planting. And just like trench planting, all up and down, it will grow roots everywhere the stem touches the soil, basically. And it helps obtain water and nutrients from the soil and ultimately lead to a healthier tomato plant with the potential for larger and better harvests. Any part of the main stem that is covered with soil will sprout new roots, and more roots lead to a larger, healthier tomato plant with more fruit. And that is the goal, right? Okay, so for deep planting, you want to dig a hole about half as deep as your seedling is tall. Place the seedling in the hole, backfill the soil just like you did before, and stake or cage it, and water it in generously, and make sure it's nice and tucked in and happy. Don't push on it too hard, but just, you know, tuck it in. Next. All right, so containers. And like I said, this would be my choice, especially if you're just starting. Because then you can just buy a bag of potting soil and you can worry about the tomato plant and not all the other good stuff. You can do whatever you want. But if you're just a beginner, that's my suggestion. So growing in Tahoe, you sometimes have to follow the sun, and we all know that, and it's shady a lot of places, and you can feel a 10-degree difference when you go from the sun to the shade. So imagine how happy your tomato would be if you watched it throughout the day and moved it to help it out. It would be super happy. If you have the luxury of doing that, I would do that. Like, you can maximize the amount of sunlight, and you're going to get more tomatoes and riper tomatoes faster. All right, so you want to fill your pot about half full is what I like to do, because you can always put more soil in, and you want to go nice and deep. And you place the seedling in there and backfill the soil just like you would in the ground, you know, all the way to the top of the pot with the top of the tomato plant the leaves starting about right here. And do it just like you did before. Planting is pretty basic, but you know, container planting is probably the easiest. You just put it in the dirt, water it in, and you can put a tomato cage in a container. You can put a steak in a container. Just make sure it's not going to tip over when it gets heavy, because that could wreck your plant, break it in half. So prop it up against something if it gets too heavy. All right, next. A few rules to grow tomatoes by, and see this basket? I had baskets like that on my counter, on my kitchen table in Tahoe, believe it or not. Maybe even a couple bigger ones than that too, but I was pleasantly surprised. My garden was right in the smack dab in the middle of the backyard in the sun all day, so I was lucky. We don't all have that in Tahoe. It's very shady. You want to water consistently. I can't stress that enough. It can lead to other things if you do not, and we'll get to that. Just water the same amount every day. If it's hotter, give them a little more water because you know the ground is drier, but do not water when it's hot outside. But you probably won't have that problem in Tahoe. I'm talking like 90, maybe you might, because that hot water is going to go right onto your roots. So just be aware. Be aware of how hot it is when it comes out of the hose, or how hot the top of the soil is. I like to use fish emulsion, and I just say fish emulsion because it's high in nitrogen and tomatoes love that. And you want to do that regularly, about once a week. You can use whatever you want, but you know, mix it with water. Use a watering can so you have control over how much, and make sure you dilute it because you don't want to put that straight on there. That's all kinds of bad, and it's really smelly. So be prepared for that. But it's worth it. It really, really, really makes your tomato plants grow nicely, and the green and then leaves are so healthy. And yes, it's a must. All right, and then enjoy your harvest. Just totally enjoy it. Give it to your friends. Do whatever. You know, take pictures of it. You know, brag on Instagram or whatever it is you want to do, or whatever it is you like to do. You know. All right, next. All right, here's some of the problems you might come across when you're growing tomatoes. Let's start with blight, because blight's not really a thing that Tahoe is going to deal with unless weird weather and it's wet and warm and just, you know, kind of like Louisiana a bit. Blight's a plant disease caused by mildews, rusts, and smuts, and it just happens. And one of the most common ways it happens is when your leaves are touching the ground and getting wet, or clustered together with each other and, like, you know, getting all yucky with, you know, in there with each other and no air. So you want to look for that still, because you just get rid of those, pull those leaves off, just everything yucky, take it off. One of the biggest struggles with tomatoes is over or under watering. And if you have good soil, it retains the water like you want it to, you might not have this problem, but it's something to be aware of. Just because it's wilty doesn't mean it's dry. Overwatering, they'll tend to turn yellow, but so will a dying leaf. So you just kind of got to use your judgment, ask other people's opinion, what they think about your plants. But, you know, only if you're really overwatering them or really underwatering them will you see that. So just be consistent. You can get, if you don't water consistent, you can get irregular tomatoes, unhappy plants, and cat facing, which I think is really cool because it looks just like a cat's head. And I just get a kick out of that. Nature's just crazy. Yeah, you can still eat tomato though, no problem. Just cut that out. Cut all the black out that's in there. I mean, if you like to do that, if you don't want to waste it. Some of the most common pests are those worms we talked about. This guy, it's a pretty fat little guy. You'll maybe some people find them with their fingers before they see them. And what you want to do is you just want to pluck them off, and you unfortunately just kill them. And it turns into a hawk moth. I didn't know that. I looked it up just because I was curious. And that little hawk is the size of a small bird. and I don't know if I've ever seen one. So powdery mildew is something that can happen, and I notice that zucchini does that sometimes too, and I don't like to put my tomato plants anywhere near my zucchini. That's just how my garden is. I don't know, just a precaution, but you want to take those leaves off as soon as you see them. Anything with white powdery, it's exactly that, powdery mildew. Take it off. And I've you could look up your own treatment, but sometimes you can rinse it off. It depends. So this sounds like a lot of work, but it's really not. If you just have to look at them every day, and you'll get a clue. They'll give you a clue. Another problem you can have is lack of fruit set, and that is due to the temperature, too cold or too hot. That's why flowers bloom, and hopefully Mother Nature cooperates with us. Another thing could be a lack of pollinators. The bees aren't out yet, which I haven't really seen a lot of bees even yet this year. A lot of little bugs, but not a lot of honeybees, but everybody pollinates. So, but that's one of the main things. And we'll talk about how you can take care of that as well. And that would be from hand pollination. And we were going to go over that next. So you just mimic what the bees do basically. And, they buzz around and they collect the pollen on little furry legs, and then they go bounce on another flower and rub on it. And you can do that with, my favorite thing is the electric toothbrush. You just go around touching all the flowers and touching the stem. Or you can shake it just back and forth gently like this. And what it's doing is you're making the pollen fall off onto the other flowers. So you're mimicking wind and nature itself. So there's ways to get around it by doing that. You can use a paintbrush, just a regular paintbrush, and just pretend like it's the bee's feet, and just touch a flower, touch another flower, touch another flower. And yeah, you'll find the way you like to do it, but hopefully it won't be a problem. But if you're not getting any fruit set, then I would suggest start doing it as soon as you can. And remember, never rinse when they're flowering, because you're going to rinse the pollen off, and that's going to give you a deformed tomato or no tomato at all. So it's good not to water your tomato plants from the top, just as a general rule. Just water them from below. They will thank you. Next. Okay, here's some nutrition facts about tomatoes. They're pretty good for you. The health benefits are a great source of vitamins, and they protect heart health, improve your vision, boost digestive health, help with diabetes management. And I'm sure if you wanted to know more about these topics, you could read about them. Guard skin health and protect against certain cancers. Nutritional facts, they're very low in calories, and this is for, a tomato about that big. 22 calories, that's nothing. No fat, of course, barely any sodium, that might be a little bit, but that's okay. Carbohydrates, barely any, 4.8, and a little bit of protein. And the vitamins and minerals, the most is the vitamin C. That's a lot of vitamin C, so eat your tomatoes. And, that's one of the reasons tomatoes work really well to clean certain things like silver, because of the citric acid in there. Yeah, and you can look that up too if you like. It's a cool trick about tomatoes. Use your ugly tomatoes to do other things with. And they have a little calcium, a little iron, vitamin B, which is always a good thing, magnesium. That's always good for your blood. And yeah, I don't think anyone ever worries about eating a tomato like it might be anything bad, because it's probably one of the healthiest things you could eat. And they're in everything, so you're getting tomatoes whether you like it or not. Next. All right, so New Jersey, out of all the places, recognizes tomatoes as the state vegetable. I was surprised, because it's pretty moist over there and pretty humid over there, but they must grow some good tomatoes. And the largest tomato that's ever been recorded was 3.5 kilos which is almost 8 pounds. And that's like a baby. That's a big tomato. That's a very big tomato. And like we said before, the tomato is actually a fruit. It's actually a berry, which is pretty interesting. And in Spain, they celebrate tomatoes by having a giant tomato fight in the town of Bunal, Spain. I think we've all seen that on TV, or I know I have in years past. So that's pretty neat. I wonder if they're the ugly tomatoes, or they just have so many, or they're just sick of them, probably. All right, next. Some of the easy ways to use tomatoes, quick out of the garden, you know, just if you want to eat something that night, if you don't feel like doing a whole canning process, but that is also very rewarding and very fun. And I suggest getting into that if you get a good crop, or maybe just buy some from the store and try it yourself first before you use your good tomatoes. If you want to do something like that, you can also can your salsa, but favorite ways to use tomatoes are salsa, homemade pasta sauce, stewed tomatoes, which are so good. You can just eat them like a bowl of soup. They're just so good. Fresh on salads, of course, you know, all those salads, not just green salads. There's so many different salads. Just eat them as a snack, or dry them up, sun-dried tomatoes, and you can keep those. If you preserve those correctly, you can keep those for a while. Give them to your friends. That's what I do. I always have too many, so I give all the cherry tomatoes and stuff mostly to my friends. I keep the big ones because they make sauce and stewed tomatoes. And the things I like to can are the salsa, the pasta sauce, and the stewed tomatoes. And those recipes are easy to find. You just got to find the one that you like the flavor. And yeah, they're real simple, and most of the stuff is in your garden anyway. So that's even more rewarding. Combining all the things with the tomatoes to make all these different things. Very exciting. All right, next. Okay, now you get to finally see the kind of tomatoes you're going to be growing. And I love lemons of any kind, so this one caught my eye right off the bat, just from the look of it. It's a beautiful looking, beefy, not a lot of seeds looking little tomato. And this is an indeterminate tomato. First fruit in 70 to 75 days. Perfect for us in Tahoe. We have 90 days on a good summer out. The dwarf lemon ice is a mid-season regular leaf dwarf, producing abundant small to medium 6-ounce lemon yellow heart-shaped tomatoes with paler yellow dense flesh. Delightful, well-balanced sweet flavors. The trees are like tree-like plants, great disease resistance, and grows about 3.5 feet tall. And they are perfect for containers and cold tolerant. So that is why, besides how cute they are, I chose them for those reasons. For containers and for cold tolerant. Of course, anything that's good for a container is going to do just as good in the ground. Next. And this lemon ice tomato, we got from Tomato Fest, and they have a thing called the Dwarf Tomato Project. It's not just them, it's a whole bunch of different people, just a bunch of members and volunteers, and they get together and they do this. They make species of tomatoes. So this one is a cross between a Rosa Vetrov and an Anna Banana Russian. So 2 Russian tomatoes, and we all know it's cold there, so. Made by Patrina Nusky Small in 2007, named Nosy F1. That was its original name. Selected and named by project volunteer Linda Black. And I read about a lot of these tomatoes in the Dwarf Tomato Project, and all the same names kept popping up. So this seems to be a small group of people that have done a lot of work. So next. Rosella Crimson. This is beautiful. This is our determinate tomato. This is the one that's going to be like a bush. It's a pink beefsteak. Beefsteaks are meaty. That's why they're called a beefsteak. Mildly sweet, juicy with good complementary flavors. The plants have dense foliage, so nice and hardy looking. Loaded with 4 to 13 ounce fruits, so anywhere from that big to, you know, that big. From bottom to top, we hope. This is an excellent variety for almost anything: sandwiches, sauces, cooking, drying, and more. The flavor is well balanced and sweet, cold tolerant, and container friendly as well. So, next. And the history is kind of neat on this one. It originated from a cross made by Patrina Nusky Small between Budai Torpe and Stump of the World, named Sleepy First, offered to the world in 2014. Rosella Crimson was selected and named by Patrina Nusky Small after a beautiful Australian parrot known as the Crimson Rosella. I put a little picture of it right there. Beautiful, beautiful red. Let's hope we get beautiful tomatoes with that nice red color. Next. All right, this one, the name struck me first because I just loved it, and it's Italian and it just goes, and it's hard to pronounce, but I'll give it a shot. Grappoli di Inverno. Seems to me like that says grapevine. Grape on the vine, but I don't know Italian. I'll ask my husband, I guess. This is the winter grape tomato of Old Italy, where farmers would hang the fruit-covered vines and they would stay fresh well into the winter. Which is great for Tahoe, because if you want to bring your plants inside and cut them and bring them inside, hang them upside down, they will ripen like that. And they also dry perfectly and resemble little Roma tomatoes. The flavorful fruit is delicious and great for snacking, fresh or dried, cold tolerant and container friendly as well. And I just think this one is going to be really productive, and look at those cute little tomatoes. All right, next. All right, and the Grappoli di Inverno tomato is an heirloom variety that has a long and interesting history. It's believed to have originated in the Naples area of Italy and was brought to the United States in the early 1900s. So not all that long ago compared to 1600s. This tomato is unique because it's one of the few that are productive in both summer and winter. Of course, that's not going to apply to us, but I had to throw that in because it's pretty cool. To be productive through, I mean, indeterminate will survive through the winter, but to produce all winter, that's pretty neat. We're not going to have that in Tahoe because we all know how frigid cold it is. The fruit is the shape of a plum, about the size of a cherry, and has a deep red color. Next. All right, I think this is our final tomato. This is the Alaska tomato, and you see where I'm going with this one. It's cold in Alaska. And this is a tomato that is actually from Russia. And it's a short to medium-sized plant, so perfect for containers. This is an early producing tomato plant that yields lots of large, round, brilliant red, salad-type cherry tomatoes with very good flavor. So I'm thinking, you know, those perfect little red tomatoes you see, you know, on a commercial, you know, that size tomato. This is a favorite tomato variety for cooler growing climates, container friendly and disease resistant, which is really good about this one, even though I'm not seeing a lot of disease problems in Tahoe because it's so dry. Good fruit set in cold climates, which is another plus. So this one was an absolutely perfect choice and a must for us. Next. And there wasn't a lot of history on this, but it's an excellent tomato if you live at elevation or further north. Even if you have a short season, like us, you can still have fresh tomatoes on your salad. Heavy yields, good early season fresh eating. There wasn't a lot of history on it, but all the little stories I read, there was nothing that stood out, but over and over and over, it was grown in Alaska, you know, through all their day and night baloney that they have and all that. And this is the Alaska tomato that grows good in Alaska that they came up with. So sounds like this one should be pretty good for us. And as you can see, I tried to pick tomatoes that were super productive, not real big, so that they have a chance to ripen, because you're going to get towards the end of the summer. It's going to get cold. It might frost. You're probably going to have to bring some of your tomatoes in, and that's okay, as long as they have shiny on them, a little bit of shine to the flesh, because if they're dull, I've done it so many times, they're never going to turn red. I mean, they might turn orange and look gross, but if they don't have a shiny skin, just leave it on there and see what happens. Yeah, next. All right, and now we have our cheat sheet. And you guys have a copy of this and you can read it. I don't think I need to read over it for you. Yeah, thank you for letting me present to you all these things about tomatoes. And I hope that you're getting a sense of you can do it, because I wasn't a professional and I did it in Tahoe, and Dave calls it a tomato sadist because I was successful about it, and I'm happy to tell people that I was successful about it only because you can do it too. And you really can. Just don't ignore them and you'll be fine. So we have one more class coming up. Are you going to go over this, Allison, or should I?
Either or.
Okay. Well, there's one more class coming up next week with herbs with Dave and Melissa. And for our tomatoes, you're going to come pick up wherever it is you're going to come pick up on Saturday from 9 to 11. And in South Lake Tahoe, that's going to be at Cup of Coffee, which is the Verde Grill parking lot there. You know, the pretty corner of the Y with all the flowers. Truckies at the Truckee Regional Park, which is the address is given to you there. Look it up before you go and try to find it. In my opinion, because it's kind of back there a little bit, you kind of want to be sure where you're going to park so you don't have to walk too far. Tahoe City, the UC Davis Field Station. There's the address for you there. And everybody will be there at their places from 9 to 11. I will be in Truckee. I will be there a little before 9 o'clock. We're going to do a demonstration, planting demonstration, I hope. And, you know, open questions, whatever anyone shows up wants to do. I'll be there.
Awesome. Thank you, Sue. And I just want to say that you can still register for the herbs talk. The registration has not been cut off yet. And as Sue mentioned, herbs go well with everything, including tomatoes. It's also great in a salad. So yeah, it's not too late to sign up for herbs if you would like. And I did put a link in the chat, but I'll put the complete playlist link shortly after I stop sharing my screen. But all of the previous planting demonstrations for tomatoes, potatoes, leafy greens, and garlic and more are actually all recorded from last year. And we are on the UC Davis Tahoe YouTube page, and there is a grow your own high elevation gardening workshop playlist that has all of those. And if you go to, you can scroll right through the bar and figure out where the planting demonstrations happen. So you can catch Sue's planting demonstration from last year if you're unable to join her in Truckee this year. So we do have a few questions that came up. And so the first question is, do tomatoes like native Tahoe soil, or a mix at least? That comes from Chelsea.
A mix at least, Chelsea. Unless you have a superb little spot that somebody's already added to. You will need to add the soil because the soil there tends to be sandy. It's not ideal for tomatoes. You want a rich soil, a well-draining soil. Like you want to be able to put it in your hand and squeeze it in a ball and it just crumbles apart. You don't want the Tahoe soil that's more like sand. And plus that will just bog down your root system too. So you want to put better soil if you're going to plant in the ground. But you don't have to replace it, just amend it.
Perfect. All right. She had another question that kind of relates to somebody else's question, which is, will a 5-gallon felt container be large enough for tomato? And is it one plant per container?
I would do 1 per container, and you could do some basil at the bottom or something like that. But I would do, if you want it to grow properly and big, I would do 1, but you can do 2. I've done it. They just don't grow as big, but they grow together. But I would suggest for 5-gallon, just do 1. But you can companion plant around the open soil too. You don't have to waste all that space.
Perfect. So in the vein of container planting, how many indeterminate plants in a large planting pot, say approximately 18 inches in diameter?
And excuse me, Allison,
Yes.
would you go to the last slide
Sure.
on the set. It gives our contact information.
Perfect.
Next one. There you go. Thanks.
What was the size pot again?
Approximately 18 inches in diameter.
I think you could get away with doing 2 indeterminates if you did them toward, spaced them evenly. You could. I've done it. I do everything. Everything works. It just depends on like how big and how voluptuous, I guess you could say, you want your tomato plant to be.
You can always
'Cause
report back
they'll
to
be
us and let us know
sharing-
how it goes.
Yeah, they'll be sharing everything. So think of it that way.
What is a sun leaf?
The sun leaf is just a leaf that, goes off. It doesn't have any, what do they, a truss of flowers or fruit. It doesn't have a long stem, like it's going to go somewhere. It's just a leaf.
Okay, how about chicken poop compost from last year mixed with new gardening soil?
Yes, but chicken manure is okay just to put on raw, but it's better if you do it ahead of time and let it sit a couple weeks, but it's perfectly fine. And I do it all the time because I have chickens. I use the straw from the chickens to cover my garlic and it worked great. Covered it all year and gave it nutrients all year. So, yep. And I've done that where I've mixed the chicken straw into the chicken poop straw into just the plain dirt and planted in it. I've done everything and it all works. It all works. As long as you have food for the plants.
You make it sound so easy, Sue.
I love the plants. I just love them. It is easy. If you love them, it's easy.
All right, so I just scrolled through to check and see if I got everybody's question. Annie, were any others directed to you that I maybe didn't see?
No, I've sent them over to you.
Perfect. All right, so I think that was it for questions. So what's on the screen right now is Sue's contact information. If you have any questions that come up, and you probably will, make sure you take a little screenshot or get your phone out and take a picture of Sue's email address. I think it'll also be included with the cheat sheets that will be distributed at a future email that's from Slow Food Lake Tahoe. The recording for this presentation is going to be available on the YouTube page for the UCCE Lake Tahoe Master Gardeners. I did put a link to the chat of the playlist that has all of last year's presentations, that has demonstrations of all the planting. If you have questions for the Lake Tahoe Master Gardeners, anything about the workshops or anything, even just looking funky in your garden in general, definitely feel free to take a picture and send it to tahoevegtalk@gmail.com. Register for more events at slowfoodlaketahoe.org. Their events page, specifically the herb talk, which is coming up next week. And you can also check out the demo garden pages at the tahoe.ucdavis.edu website. Otherwise, I believe that's it. Do you have something to add, Annie?
Yes, we'd like to open it up to questions from the audience. You now have the ability to unmute yourself. If you can't, let me know. Put up a hand or send me a note in the chat. Does anybody have any burning question that they would like to ask Sue?
Anything, even if you think it's a silly question.
Even better if you think it's silly.
I see Valerie unmuted herself.
Yeah, hi, it's Valerie. Question, I was taking some notes, and for the tomato, when you say plant in a container, fill the pot half full. So what size of container are you recommending?
I would use at least a 5-gallon.
Okay,
I mean, you could get away with a 3-gallon for one plant. That's all you have, but I would go with a 5.
okay.
And the
thank
only
you.
reason I say fill it half full is because you can always add more. You want to put your plant in and kind of see where you're at.
Right, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
I just had another question come up in the chat from Carolina or Carolina. When is it safe to put tomatoes outside? That's a very
Well,
Tahoe specific question.
I think you're past your last frost, but as long as, I think you're good as long as the coming week isn't gonna get below freezing at night. They don't like anything below 45. They'll tolerate up to about 39, 38, and then after that, you kind of worry. But I would say before Father's Day, but not June 1st. Wouldn't say June 1st. Sometime between June 1st and Father's Day.
You
It
can't
all
always
depends on the
predict.
year, but
Just be
yeah, I
ready.
wouldn't do anything
Pull 'em
sooner than
inside.
June 1st.
Sue, it's Valerie. I have one more question. So tomatoes, you said they like sun. Is it that they like the sunshine or do they like heat or both?
They like both. They like both. And I forgot to mention to use, if you can use a black container, that's the best because it will attract the heat. And faster in the morning rather than like a white container or something like that. Just every little bit helps.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have burning questions? Please join in. Well, if not, then thank you very, very much for participating. Hopefully you took a picture of the last slide with all of the addresses so that you can contact us. And we will say good evening and happy gardening to you all. Thank you so much for participating and buying the plants to support our program. Programs plural.
Oh, sorry, I have a question.
Okay.
Can we ask if we show up on Saturday and we haven't paid in advance, can we buy some at any of the locations?
Go ahead, Allison.
Usually, as long as there is plenty of inventory, I'm not actually positive what the inventory is, but usually every single demonstration garden or pickup location has extra plants available for sale.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. Anything?
I have a question from Megan, and she's asking about companion plants for tomatoes. You can look, there's like 10 or 11 that are really good. I like to do basil and marigolds. Onions are good too, but I don't like to do anything that's going to share the dirt that closely, just because I don't want to pull the onion and hurt the tomato. There's quite a few, and those are just two of my favorites because I'm going to grow those anyways, you know.
You can look on the Master Gardener site. It's UCCE Master Gardener program at Lake Tahoe, I believe, or if you just do a search for those words, or the words UCANR, UCANR at edu.edu. Or I said too many of those, didn't I? Search for the University of California Extension Service, and there is a long list of things like companion plants under the Master Gardening program. And so you'll be able to find that. And if you can't, just send me an email at that Tahoe Veg Talk at gmail.com, and I will get you the exact link.
I think I found it and put it in the chat.
Oh,
but
thank
you
you
can, you
so
can
much.
double check it to make sure I actually got the right one.
Thank you. Yes, that looks like it. Thank you.
Great job, Sue. Great job.
Thank you.
Wonderful job.
Thank you guys for bearing with me, and thank you everybody for attending. I
Yes.
really appreciate
so
it.
much,
And thanks
Sue.
for all your help.
Great presentation. Thank you.
I hope to see some people on Saturday so that I can talk to some people in real life.
All right. You will, I'm
All
sure.
right.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
All
All
right.
right.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for joining us.
So Annie, I was just gonna say
Yeah.
that at the tomato separation party on Friday, yeah, if you want to just either you, Dave, or Melissa, you all have my cell phone. If you want to just text me like how to pick them up. I know that they try to lock the garden sometimes. So if there's like a good like hiding spot, I'll plan to go
There's
pick
a
them
good
up.
hiding spot. Don't
Yeah.
worry.
Okay,
Don't
I'll
worry.
plan to just pick him up at about like 4:30 or 5.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thank you so much, Allison. You did a
Allison, you did great.
Thank you.
great job. Really appreciate your help.
Oh, no problem. I'm glad I was able to help.
Me too. Thank you. Since I screwed up the dates.
But so you don't need me next week, right?
Right. Stuart will
Okay.
do it next week.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
All right. I'll see you all soon-ish.
I hope so. Give me a call if you have a minute.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.
Bye, everybody.